Before we get started on Dharma talk, please join me in invoking the Buddha's name 3 times. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Dear Venerable Teacher, dear Sangha, good afternoon. If you're able to scan the little code thingy, it will take you to the first chapter of the Dhammapada, my own translation of it. That way, if you'd like to follow along for our last 2 verses, we are finally at the end of the first chapter of the twin verses of Yamaka Vagga. And so if you've been following along with us, we've been going through pretty much every verse. I may have just skipped a couple, but nonetheless. Okay, everyone's kind of been here before. So I won't explain too much what the Dhammapada is, but just to reiterate, Dhammapada is one of the most important and oldest Buddhist texts. So it's a combination of teachings of the Buddha throughout his lifetime. So it's not just one teaching in one setting. It's a combination of hundreds of different sermons compiled into 26 chapters, 7, something like that, into 400 and some odd number of verses. So I will just recite the last 2 verses because that's the last of the first chapter. And then as usual, I'll give the story behind the verses, and we'll go through that commentary and that discussion. So these are verses 19 and 20. The thoughtless man, even if he can recite a large portion of the Dharma, but is not a doer of it, has no share in the monkhood, but is like a cowherd counting the cows of others. The follower of the Dharma, even if he can recite only a small portion of the Dharma, but having forsaken passion and hatred and ignorance, possesses the true knowledge and serenity of mind. He, caring for nothing in this world, or that to come, has indeed a share in the monkhood. So we use the word monkhood in this verse, but this applies to any practitioner in general. So even if you're not a monk or nun, obviously, this still applies to you. But the story behind these verses is that during the Buddha's time, there were two friends who both ordained. One was older than the other. The younger one, having a pretty good memory and is well versed in how to study, he memorized the Tripitaka. The Tripitaka is the 3 baskets of Buddhism. It includes the Vinaya Pitaka, which is the code and conduct for monks and nuns, the Sutta Pitaka for all the discourses and sutras, and Abhidharma, the psychology, Buddhist psychology. So he's very well versed in these teachings, and so he had many followers. He led many students and disciples under him. So he was very, very well versed in the Dharma. The older monk, the older friend, wasn't so versed in the teachings, but he was able to acquire and learn enough to go out and practice. So his main practice was meditation, vipassana meditation, insight meditation. That was his main practice. Fortunately, his practice was fruitful because he was able to attain arahatship. He was an arahat. He was a fully enlightened person. And so one day, the enlightened friend wanted to go visit his other friend at the monastery. So he sent 2 students out to let them go to the monastery and say, hey, our master's coming. Just a heads up so you can prepare what you need to prepare. But when the 2 students arrived at the monastery and met with the other friend, the two students went up to him and said, "We're students of your old friends, and we're here to pay homage to you and to let you know that he's coming." And that friend was like, "He has students. He doesn't know anything. He's not a learner in the Dharma. He doesn't know the Vinaya, or the practices, or the precepts and codes and conduct, and et cetera, et cetera." It's like, how does he have students? And so with that kind of mentality, he's like, well, once he gets here, I'm going to test him. I'm going to ask him some Dharma questions and see exactly how much he actually does know. But someone overheard this and went to the Buddha and was like, "Hey, Buddha, like, this guy over here is about to do something he probably shouldn't be doing." Right? So someone was a tattletale and went and told the Buddha. And the Buddha, knowing that the other monk, the older one, was enlightened, and this younger one didn't know that, he was afraid that by trying to ask him questions and kind of embarrass him is what he was trying to do. Because he was a fully enlightened being, doing that would have caused severe harm to him, suffering, karmic suffering, right? And so to avoid that, the Buddha was like, let me instead ask the questions here. So once the older monk came and arrived at the monastery, and the two kind of sat down, the Buddha asked questions to the older monk. And he asked him questions on meditation and about the jhanas, which are the meditative absorption states of mind, right? And he asked him about just the practice in Buddhism, in meditation. And he asked this to the learned monk first, and he was not able to answer any of his questions. He couldn't explain, he couldn't answer the experiential piece part of it, right? But when he asked the older monk, who was experienced, who was enlightened, and asked those questions, he was able to fully answer those questions. He knew exactly what the answers were and how to practice them and how to obtain those realizations. And so the Buddha would praise the older monk. And he did not praise the other monk. And so the other monks asked, well, why did you praise the older monk and not our teacher, who's well-learned in Dharma, who's a very well-known teacher? And at that point, the Buddha gave these two verses. And so he gave these two verses because he was trying to let his students and disciples and people know that just because you know a lot doesn't make you a doer of what you know. You can be a scholar in psychology and anthropology and medicine, but if you don't practice what you study, then you're just useless. You have useless knowledge. What good is this knowledge if you don't do anything with it? Right? And so in Buddhism, this is very important. And we emphasize, teacher and I emphasize a lot, that Buddhism is not just an intellectual thing that you just need to study and know. Just because you read something and understand it, okay, I understand it, I know it. Okay, then what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with that knowledge? Knowing it doesn't enlighten you. Knowing what the Dharma is, knowing how to meditate, knowing all these other components of Buddhism does not make you anything besides a knower of words. All you do is you know how to move your mouth to make these little words that sound like Dharma. That's all you're doing. You're not enlightening anyone. So because Buddhism is a very practical path, spiritual path, it's important to know and study, obviously. It's as important to actually practice what you know and study. What are you here for? Real question. Feel free to answer. What are you here for? Why are you here? Sorry?
For myself, it's balancing the scales.
Okay. Michaela?
I feel peaceful here.
Okay. You feel peaceful when you're not here?
Yeah.
Okay, good. That's the point, really. But we're all here for one reason or another, but it comes down to, I want to be happy, right? I want freedom. And what is freedom? Freedom is not living in America, because we're not free here, for the most part. Freedom is the absence of what we would call the three poisons: ignorance, greed, and anger. Freedom is absence of attachments. Freedom is absence of wrong perceptions. Freedom is absence of wrong views. Freedom is absence of all the opposites of the Eightfold Path. Right? So the Buddha is here telling you that just because you know the knowledge, just because you know my Dharma, just because you're able to read and understand this intellectually, does not mean that you are pacified. Your mind's not pacified. Your mind is not free. You are not liberated just because you know information. I made this example yesterday during meditation class. Buddhism is like a cookbook. If you read it, right, you're reading a cookbook. You know how and what you need for the recipe, right? So reading the cookbook is just knowing the Dharma. Gathering the ingredients is practicing the Dharma. Being able to taste the food is the realization that you get from the Dharma, right? But you can't realize anything unless you actually cook your meal. Until you cook that fried chicken, you don't know what it tastes like. And if I know what something tastes like, I can't explain it to you how that tastes like. I can't explain how an orange tastes like if you've never had an orange. The moment I say any word to describe how an orange tastes, I'm already wrong. Right? And so that's why it's important when we learn something that you get the knowledge, you read what you need to know, you try to comprehend it and understand it, and then you go and meditate on it. Right? Meditation here is the contemplation piece. It's a self-reflection piece. Right? And sometimes people get confused. Well, what do you mean by meditate on it? When you read something, try to reiterate it in your mind as you're meditating. What you're trying to do is really dissect the teaching. You're trying to pull it apart, take its pieces out to see how the inner workings look and how everything works, and then put them all back together. Right? You're dissecting these teachings. First noble truth, for instance, is that in life there is suffering. What does that mean? Suffering of what? Who's suffering? Who's causing the suffering? What's causing the suffering? Where is the suffering coming from? Right? These are the questions you ask yourself. This is how you dissect that teaching. But if you just read life is suffering, oh, life is suffering, of course. Someone hits me, I get hurt. You get in an accident, I get hurt. Someone slaps me, I get hurt. I get hot pepper, my mouth hurts, right? This is not suffering. Suffering Buddhism is much more than just physical suffering or mental suffering or emotional suffering. Suffering in Buddhism is the denial of freedom. And again, freedom here is the absence of attachments, absence of desires, absence of not getting what you want. It's the absence of expectations, the removal, the eradication of expectations. We all live in a world of expectations. Our entire life is revolved around the expectation of, I need to be successful, I need to have a big house, I need to have several cars, I need to have exactly 2 children, I have to make this much money, I have to have these many friends, I have to have this type of food, this type of car, etc., right? You have all these expectations of life. And when you are not able to achieve them, you suffer. Because you wanted something specific and you didn't get it. You wanted someone to act a certain way, to be a certain way. You wanted a job to run a certain way, your car to do this or do that, your friends to act like this or not act like that. And when those expectations are not met, or when it goes against your expectations, then you suffer. This is a way bigger topic than it needs to be, that I'm going to go into. But the point here is that when we are trying to learn, and when we learn, and when you read, and when you try to study, you need to apply that study. You need to apply that knowledge into your life. Because if you read How to Be Happy, Buddha literally tells you how to be happy. He gave us the Four Noble Truth, Eightfold Path. That's literally the path. It's literally called the path. And so if you walk it, if you apply it, if you utilize it, you're able to be happy. But most people don't do that. They're just, whether they just don't make excuses for not having time, whether they're lazy, or just don't know how, or whatever it may be. But just reading How to Be Happy does not actually make you happy. Right? But if we read How to Be Happy, and we meditate on it, and figure out what in our life is an obstacle toward that happiness, then we can start working on removing those obstacles. Our freedom is buried underneath tons of rubble, right? And we're a single person. And so it's going to take time to remove those small pieces. But eventually, as you start moving them, right, it's one less obstacle in the way toward that freedom. That freedom is there. It is there. It is just covered in our expectations, our desires, our attachments, our wants and needs and hates and loves and all the other stuff in our mind. But as we start taking apart those little pieces one by one, it may not seem like a lot is being achieved or a lot is happening, but it is one less obstacle in the way. Right? You have a big bowl of soup or whatever, right? It looks ridiculous. You have a little tiny spoon to eat that big bowl of soup. But all you need to do is just take one bite at a time, and eventually the soup is gone. Likewise, you simply just have to take out small pieces and chunks of this defilement and the obstacles in our spiritual path, and we're able to find the light at the end of the tunnel. So don't attempt to, when we're reading Dharma or anything in life, right? Anything that is trying to teach you something, don't just take it as face value, right? Because if you take it at face value and you're trying to just know it intellectually, it's not really going to help you there, right? People who go to medical school, they learn how to cut people open and do sutures and operations and surgeries, right? Learning, they don't know how to do it by reading a book, by seeing pictures and diagrams. No, they learn how to do surgery by actually practicing and doing surgery, right? They have little test labs and stuff and fake people. I don't know. But there is a practice in what they're learning, right? So we have to do the same. And it seems like a never-ending operation to learn Buddhism, and it is. It's very comprehensive. There's no doubt in that. But the foundations that you need, the core teachings, the pillars that will actually help you achieve that freedom is very simple. It is the Four Noble Truths, Eightfold Path. That's what you need to do. The Buddha's first sermon was the Four Noble Truths, Eightfold Path, and his 5 disciples, all one after another, became enlightened. So all you need is that. We have all these extra teachings, all these hundreds and thousands of other teachings, because there are different ways to teach the same thing, right? One of the beautiful things that the Buddha did was he taught according to his audience, right? If you look in the back room and see all the books on the shelves, that's maybe like 1% of all the Dharma. Maybe less than 1%. Right? There's books the size of with thousands of pages. That's not even one volume of the Dharma. Because the Buddha taught according to who he was teaching. If he was teaching to, if he went to a palace and was teaching to the royals or the ministers or highly educated, he would teach them in a way that they would understand because they're highly educated. If it was teaching to a small village or a poor village, he would teach them in a way that they would understand because they're probably, either illiterate or uneducated or undereducated, right? And so he taught the same Dharma in different ways so that everybody had the opportunity to understand. So that's why we have thousands of books. They all say the same thing, just with different words. So it's important it's important when we read something to read at least another dozen books or resources of the same topic, first of all. Okay, I have 4 minutes. And as you start to come to the temple more often, one of the things that we do, of course, is we do chanting, right? We have a whole book of different chants. And our general chant is pretty short, it's nice and sweet, it's repetitive. But it's also beneficial because you're able to eventually memorize what we're chanting, right? Because as you're chanting, for the most part, if this is your first, second, third time, you're going to really pay attention to what you're reading, right? Because you want to know what you're reading. It's important to know what you're reading. But eventually, just like in meditation, when you do contemplation, you are rereading, you're re-reciting, you're taking more focus away of reading the actual words to trying to understand the meaning of the words, right? So it's important, I always say, that if you've been here for a while, hopefully you start learning, memorizing the chants. Because that way, when you're chanting, you can focus on actually meditating on what you're reciting versus trying to just read the words word for word, right? And so after a while, that way when you're sitting to chanting, you're able to comprehend a little bit more of what you're reading, what you're chanting. In the evening chants, when we do, some of you are here at the evening chanting, when we're chanting the Amitabha Sutra. Amitabha Sutra is a beautiful sutra. There's lots of detailed imagery of Amitabha and his land and whatnot. But if you read it at face value, it makes no sense. It sounds and looks like a fairy tale. Because it does. It's talking about how the roads are gold and there's pavilions of the 7 different gems and stones. It sounds very fantastical, but there's a reason, there's a meaning of why that type of imagery is used. And everything in any sutra, every little detail is there for a specific reason. There's nothing that is there just to be there. All the imagery in this temple, everything that you see is there for a specific reason. It represents something very specific. Nothing in here is just there for show. The flowers are not here just for show. Little cups on the altars are not there just for show. The flowers, the fruits are not there for show. They all have a symbolism. They all mean something. If we don't know what they mean, then we're not going to appreciate the value of them. We're not going to appreciate the meaning of them. The same way with when we study and chant. If we don't know the meaning of what we're reciting or reading or studying, and we're not actually applying those teachings and whatnot to our practice, then how are you going to become enlightened? After I finish the Dhammapada, which is probably going to take me a year, I'm going to go into the Amitabha Sutra, which is a beautiful sutra, and we chant every evening. And the first part of it, like any other sutra, it describes, describes the occasion of the teaching, who's there, and why they're there. So in Amitabha Sutra, it's describing, thus I've heard at one time the Buddha dwelt Ashravasi in the Jeta Grove, in the garden, benefactor of orphans and solitary, together with 2,500 monks, all arahats, list the names of all the monks that are there, the 16 arhats and 4 bodhisattvas. And so when we read that, we're like, oh, these are just names. These are just names of monks. They are, but their names are there for specific reasons. There's a story to each of those names. There's a story to each of those monks that are there. There's a reason why they're listed and not the 2,500 other monks. And so if we just read face value and not really study and know what they mean, then there's no point of studying and reading the sutra. Okay, I'm going to stop there. Point is, read, study, but practice what you read and study. Okay, what questions do you have? Concerns? Emotional outbursts? I have to update my little thing here for the next chapter, but usually whenever I make chant books or anything to chant, I typically try to create my own translations. So I did that with the Dhammapada. So it's easier to read and chant versus some very technical English that some translators do. So anyway, if there's no questions, then we will transfer the merit and go to chanting. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha, Namo Shakyamuni Buddha, Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. For any positive karmic action we've accumulated here today, we wish to transfer the merit to all sentient beings and wish them full enlightenment. Please rise. We're going to use the big instruments. You can use the bell up there. Oh, okay. Take your book with you. Go ahead. chant the regular one? Chant the regular general?
Yeah.
Okay. Body, speech, and mind in perfect oneness, I send my heart along with the sound of the. May the hearers awaken from forgetfulness and transcend all anxiety and sorrow. Listen, listen, this wonderful brings me back to my true home. Gratitude we offer this incense to all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas throughout space, and may it be fragrant as earth herself, reflecting our careful effort, our wholehearted mindfulness, and the fruit of understanding. May we and all beings be companions of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. May we awaken from forgetfulness and realize our true home. Sense in the censer now is burning, all the Dharma realm in every place, auspicious clouds appearing, our sincere intention thus fulfilled, as all Buddhas now show their perfect body, homage to the incense cloud canopy, Bodhisattva and great Bodhisattvas. To the eternally abiding Buddhas, the supreme Dharma, and sagely Sangha throughout my realm and the realm of empty space and 3 periods of time. To the fundamental teacher Shakyamuni Buddha, Maitreya honored future Buddha, Manjushri great wisdom Bodhisattva, universal great conduct Bodhisattva, all Dharma guarding Deva Bodhisattva, and the glorious mountain assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. the land of ultim Avalokiteshvara, great compassion, Bodhisattva, great strength, Bodhisattva, earth storing, great vow, Bodhisattva, and the assembly of great pure sea like Bodhisattva. Great compassionate Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, Namo, great compassion. Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, Namo, great compassionate Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Ratnatrayaya Namo Aryavalokite Bodhisattvaya Mahasattvaya Mahakarunikaya Om Sarvaravaye Sodanadasya Swaha Bodhisattva of great compassion, to whom we bow in gratitude. Awakening and loving kindness in children, sprouts, and all beings, some to be born, to whom we bow in gratitude. Way fearlessly and compassionately the stream of all our ancestral teachers, to whom we bow in gratitude. Is deep and lovely, we now have a chance to see it and practice it. We vow to realize its true meaning. Bodhisattva Havadokita, while moving in the deep course of Vaishnava, shed light on the five skandhas and found them equally empty. After this penetration, he overcame ill-being, listen, Shariput, form is emptiness, emptiness is form, form is not other than emptiness, emptiness is not other than form. The same is true with feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. Listen, Shariputra, all dharmas are marked with emptiness. They are neither produced nor destroyed, neither defiled nor immaculate, neither increasing nor decreasing. Therefore, in emptiness there is neither form nor feelings nor perceptions nor mental formation nor consciousness, no eye or ear or nose or tongue or body or mind, no form, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no object of, no realms of elements, no interdependent origins, and no extinction of them, no ill-being, no cause of ill-being, no end of ill-being, and no path, no understanding, no attainment, because there is no attainment. The Bodhisattvas ground in Vaishnava, find no obstacles for them, no obstacles they overcome fear, liberating themselves forever from illusion and realizing perfect nirvana. All Buddhas in the past, present, and future arrive at Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. Therefore one should, that perfect understanding is the highest mantra, the unequaled mantra, the destroyer of ill-being, the incorruptible truth, the mantra of Prajnaparamita should therefore be proclaimed. Gate Gate Para Gate Para Samgate Bodhi Swaha Gate Gate Para Gate Para Samgate Bodhi Swaha Gate Gate Para Gate Para Samgate Bodhi Swaha. Your name Avalokiteshvara, we aspire to learn your way of listening in order to help relieve the suffer listening with all our attention and open-heartedness. We will sit and listen without any prejudice. We will sit, listen without judging or reacting. We will sit and listen. Other person is saying, and also what is being left unsaid. We know that just by listening deeply, we already alleviate a great deal of pain and suffer in the other person. Your name, Manjushri, we aspire to learn your way and to look deeply into the heart of things and into the hearts of people. We will look all our attention and open-heartedness. We will look with unprejudiced eyes. We will look with or reacting. We will look deeply so that we will be able to see and under suffering through the impermanent and selfless nature of all that. We will practice your way of using the sword of understanding to cut through the bonds of suffering, thus free ourselves and other species. Your name, Samanta Bhadra, we aspire to learn to act with the eyes and heart of compassion, to bring joy to one person in the morning and to ease the pain of one person in the afternoon. We know that happiness of others is our own happiness, and we aspire to practice joy on the path. We know that every word, every look, every action, and every smile can bring happiness to others. We practice wholeheartedly. We ourselves may become an inexhaustible source of peace and joy for our loved ones and for all species. Your name, Chitti Garbha, we aspire to learn your way of being present where there is darkness, suffering, oppression, and despair, so we can bring light, hope, relief, and liberation to those places. We are determined not to forget about or abandon refuge in the Buddha, the one who shows me the way in this life. I take refuge in the Dharma, the way of understanding and of love. I take refuge in the community that lives in harmony and awareness. In the refuge of Buddha, I clearly see the path of light and beauty. The world dwelling in the refuge of Dharma, I learn to open many doors on the path of transformation. Dwelling in the refuge of Sangha, shining light supports, keeping my practice free of obstruction. Refuge in the Buddha, in myself I aspire to help all people recognize their own awakened nature, realizing the mind of love, taking refuge in the Dharma. In myself I aspire to help all people fully master the ways of practice and walk together on the path of liberation, taking refuge in myself. I aspire to help all build fourfold communities to embrace all beings and support their transformation. The sutras practicing the way of awareness gives rise to benefits without limit. We vow to share the fruits with all being. We vow to offer tribute to parents, teachers, friends, and numerous beings who give guidance and support along